it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, it's Ivy Slater with Her Success Story. Well, welcome back to another amazing episode. I have a guest today that I've gotten to know sporadically over the last few months, and I am absolutely fascinated by her work and what she does. So it is my great pleasure to share with you Sharón Lynn Wyeth. Her accomplishments in the field has impacted education on thousands of students, been highlighted in national syndicated television programs, as well as the President of the United States yearly conference for the 50 governors. So what's amazing about Sharón is she is recognized internationally as a name expert, as she can determine one's strengths, challenges, and the purpose of one's life by deciphering a person's name. She created Neimology Science, the study of the placement of the letters in the name, after 15 years of research, followed by 3 years of testing her theories in over 70 countries, including Russia, India, and China. She has continued to develop how to interpret names over the next 22 years, which is why Neimology Science is so accurate today. I have the pleasure of speaking to Sharón today, as she has just completed speaking in Australia, and I am so grateful for you to take a few minutes out of your world travels to join us and share more about your adventure and the development. Welcome, Sharón.
Oh, Ivy, it's so nice to join you. Thank you for having me here.
So tell me, how did this get started? I believe we're all gifted with many, many gifts in our lives. And it's for us to actually open our eyes and see the opportunities and the awareness. Where did this start for you?
Well, it started on the day before my first day of teaching in my 7th year. So what was happening was I had been given all of the kids' names for the 150 kids I'd be teaching that year. And so we have 5 different classes of 30 kids. And I was making a random seating chart like I do every year, because everyone knows the teacher has to show from the first day they're in charge. And so you just put names down randomly because you know it's better than however they're going to seat themselves. And so as I was doing that, my brain was telling me things like, don't put Joshua next to Julie together. They're going to be clowns, but separated, they'll be okay. Derek's going to need extra help. Put him up front. Stephanie's going to be very stubborn. Put her over on the side where you don't have to move her seat very often. And I was doing this. And it wasn't until I started the 4th class that all of a sudden I went, wait a minute. This is what I do when I'm doing seating charts, and I know the kids, but I don't know these kids. So my brain had picked up some kind of a patterning. And so I thought, okay, I'm curious. Let me go back and write down my impressions of every child based on their name, because that's all I have, right? And then I put that aside, and I said, I'm going to wait. I want to get to know the kids for who they are. So 3 months later, when I looked at what I had written, I was astonished at the accuracy. So I said, okay, my brain's picked up something. How do I make what's subconscious conscious? So I started with these huge charts. There happened to be 8 Davids in my life at that time. And so I made a chart, David Landis, David Shippig, David Kroenig, David Wilson, you get the picture. And then I started saying, what have I observed about this person? What's every adjective, adverb I can think of that describes this David, that one, that one, that one, that one. And then I looked at my long list and I said, what's the same all the way across? Well, that has to come from the name David. Then what's different? Well, that's got to come from someplace, so it's got to come from middle or last. And that's how I started, with all these names and tons and literally hundreds of charts looking for comparisons. And then after a while, it was like, well, this name has that quality, and this very different name has that same quality. So where is it located? So it came down to individual letters. Then it came down to placement of letters. And like I said, it took me 15 years where I was always sitting there just looking for the patterns and names from my observations of different people.
That's fascinating. So you did this study over the 15 years, and oh my goodness, I wish you knew you back then. I'm surrounded by Michaels. I could have given you the lot of them. So in doing the study, and then all of a sudden, so you were a teacher, and I always say, you know, many of us are meant to teach. We all teach in different ways.
Right.
And so the teacher at heart is very often the teacher and the student, and you created this opportunity for you to study. And from this, where did this become of, okay, I'm no longer a teacher, I'm going to trademark this methodology I have learned, created, like all of a sudden you're a CEO of a company and traveling around the world. Where did that transpire?
Okay, so 4 years later, when I was still in the midst of studying this, I became a school administrator. And at the beginning, I could only see the positive qualities or characteristics of anybody. Everybody always said I was wearing pink-colored, rose-colored glasses.
I love that.
And I couldn't see the negatives. So then I became an administrator, and as we moved, because I was a military wife, I moved to a different place and was also hired as an administrator. But there I had a different kind of role. Instead of being in charge of academics and progression of the studies of the students, I was now a vice principal and disciplining. Well, I got to see plenty of negatives. And I started seeing the patterns of so I started seeing the challenges that came with the names and the letters, and I started working out those patterns. And then I became a high school principal. And then I got to the point with Neimology where I said, I'm being asked to come talk on this, and I was doing it during my summers in the United States. And then I started being asked to do overseas and just come explore, because somebody had heard me in the States, told me about somebody else, whatever. And so while I was administrator, I left and I said, I want to go test this in all the places that I've now been or lived or whatever, right? So I traveled for 3 years and tested it. And then everybody says, where can we get more? And so then I came back and I got a job as a lead trainer for a company because I could make my own hours. And so I could work 3.5 hours a day and travel and test the other 3.5 days of the week. And so anyway, it was very nice. And then I went back into back into schools, but this time I didn't want to be an administrator. I want to be a teacher again. And I said, give me all the kids nobody wants, because I had figured out this system, and I said, let's apply it and see if it can help turn kids around.
So what did you learn from that experience? What did you observe?
From when a child is talked to and addressed in their communication style, and their learning style comes in their name, and you're doing it in that methodology, a child picks up things faster and they feel better about themselves. And I would jokingly say with them, when somebody raised their hand and say, I didn't get what you just told that one. And I jokingly say, well, that's because you need to hear it this way. Here, let me tell it to you this way. You know?
So slow down a second and let's take a pause here and learn more. So when you see a name, right? What are you able to decipher? Your bio was so extensive, which I appreciated, and but I didn't give everything to our listeners. I want them to hear it from you. What do you actually see? You see a name, whatever that name may be. What do you learn from that?
Okay, so the first name is the essence of who you are. The middle name, if you have one, are intermittent characters and qualities that you normally use when you're under stress. That's where you go, your comfort level when you're under stress. But those qualities will show up periodically. They're not consistent. Your last name represents your environment and your environmental influence. What are the people around you trying to mush you and change you and influence you to be different? Okay? Then within the first name, which is the essence of you, the first vowel is your communication style, what kind of gifts you like, your learning style. Okay, all of that is hidden in just that first letter. Then, and by the end of this month, we're going to have a freebie book just on knowthename.com, because I want that information out there so everybody can learn to communicate more clearly with everyone, and it'll be free. Okay, then the first letter of the first name is your overarching reason why you're here, okay, what you came to learn, and it's also the first impression that you give. The last letter in your first name is the lasting impression, and the first thing we'll all talk about you behind your back. And then the middle letters in your first name are the characters and qualities that we've got to know you for a while normally, and that's the depth of you. And so with Neimology Science, you know so much about somebody right away. Everyone has 7 lessons that they came for in their life. I've done that from thousands and thousands of readings. The magic number 7. I mean, maybe 1 out of every 1,000 will have a different number, but the vast majority of us, it's all 7 lessons. And then the name gives you the answers. It literally says, how do you solve this problem? Okay, so for an example, if a name ends in an E, the first name ends in an E, it says that they have time challenges. It's one of the things that land there. And it's because they're so generous of nature, they give all their time away to everybody else. And then at the end of the day, they're still stuck with their own job that they still have to do because they didn't get their own stuff done.
Okay. That is a great tip for me working with my clients. I appreciate that one.
Okay, so the answer to that, because again, the answers are in the name, which is what I think is so cool, is that you say to somebody when they come and say, hey, can you help me with ABC? You say, once I finish XYZ, I can help you with ABC. And then watch what they say next. If the person says, oh, okay, then I'll see you later, you are never done with XYZ. And at the end of the day, when they say, how come you didn't come by and help me? You just shrug your shoulders and you go, I didn't finish XYZ. Because this person is looking for anybody to do their job. So why be you, right? Then let's say they come and ask you for help and you give them that same answer. I'll be happy to help you with ABC once I finish XYZ. And they go, okay, what can I do to help you? This person is saying, I don't need just anybody. I need your specific knowledge and I'm willing to give back. So then you decide, you want help, you don't want help. But that's the one you take time for. Because later on, if you need help, they're the one that you can go to.
I love this. So I want to ask you, many people in the school administration world, teachers, etc., you retire, you knit, you play golf, you do many, many different things, okay? You created an entire science, okay? You have traveled all over the world. You're a speaker. You're a resource for many major companies on how they hire and who they hire. In developing this, I mean, we like to talk about people and business and growth. What are some of the unexpected challenges and what did you learn in this journey?
Well, first of all, my last year in schools was the 2017-2018 school year. So that's very fresh. So one of my biggest challenges was, how do you help the companies and the people that are calling you, and you're doing it after work, you're doing it on the weekends, and when they'd say, would you come talk and speak to us and blah, whatever, I have to do it on a school holiday or summer. And I know that sounds crazy, but people didn't realize I was still in the classroom because I loved that. And I loved being able to get math across to children with special needs, and they became successful. So time of that and scheduling was a huge challenge for me. Okay. And then I started needing help. So then you've got to employ people, right? And you're not available during the day because you're in the classroom to answer their questions.
Right.
So
teachers aren't on their phone all day long. Yeah, listeners, teachers actually have their phone and their pocketbooks in their desk. It's not in their hand. It's not a resource all day.
And it can't be on.
Yeah.
If you have an emergency, it comes through the main office, and they decide if it's a true emergency where somebody's got to come cover your kids. And so that became a challenge. And with different radio shows or podcasts, and they say, oh, we'd like you on from here to here. And I think I'm in the classroom. So a lot of that was very challenging. And I know I missed a lot of opportunities, but I thought, no, I'm committed to the kids first. I wanted to do 40 years in education. So that was my 40th year. So now it's much better because I'm not in the classroom anymore, not this year.
So Sharón, I have to ask, what surprises in this journey? What has surprised you? What have, there has been, I'm sure, so many learning lessons, but what are some of the greatest surprises that have come your way?
It's always, how do you get out something that's brand new? Because there's such skepticism anytime something is new. There's a part of us that goes, oh, we'd like that to be true, but I don't know. Prove it, right? And so one of the largest skeptics was my dad. And after, he said, every time I call, you're saying, wait a minute, let me finish putting down my notes for a minute. Okay, now I can talk. And he said, what are you always working on? And I said, well, Dad, it's this thing of interpreting names. And so he was a physician and very scientific in nature. And he said, okay, like what? So I said, Dad, give me a name of somebody you know and I don't. And so I interpreted that one. And he gave me, a total of 5 names. And after 5 names, when he gave me the 6th one, I said, Dad, how many is it going to take? 5, 50, 500? I'm on to something here. And he is so typical of what I'm running across. And so finally he goes, okay, I get it. And he goes, what are you going to call this thing? And I said, I was thinking about alphabetology because I'm studying the letters. And he goes, no, you're studying names. You need a Neimology. And I said, well, Dad, you can't trademark a common word like name. And so he said, spell it in Latin, Neim-ology. And so the man who was very skeptical, and he told me at the time, he goes, well, it's interesting, but I'm not going to endorse it. And I said, I don't need your endorsement. It's going to endorse itself. But I thought the man who's not going to endorse it is the man who actually named it, which I think is ironic. But the real thing was, you take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. So like when I was asked to be on a telemarketing thing, where you get all those pictures of everybody and you can listen to theirs or not listen to theirs, when you're signing in for one of those series.
Right.
I was on a few of those. And one of the people that happened to listen decided her husband has just about everything. And wouldn't this be a nice gift for him? So I did his half-hour reading. I had no idea who he was. And the end result, to cut the story short, was he ended up hiring me for 6 months and saying, I want to give you the names and the positions of people while we're online. And we met once a week online. And I loved it because he was overseas and his 9 a.m. was my 5 p.m. I was already out of the classroom. and
perfect for the teacher perfect for the teacher.
Exactly. And so we would, he'd give me these names and these job descriptions. And I'd say after about 15 minutes, I go, okay, here's your number 1. Here's your number 2. And this went on. And at 4.5 months, he said, he never gave me feedback. And at 4.5 months, he said, for 4.5 months, in 15, 20 minutes at the most, you gave me the same number 1 and number 2 that my team would, who has read all the resumes, interviewed everybody, called all the references. And here you are spot on for 4.5 months. And today, our number 1 and 2 is your number 2 and 1. Why? And I said, well, you'd probably be happy with either one, but this is why I put this one number 2. And I told him, and he says, we wouldn't figure that out for 6 months to a year after he's working for us. And that's not something that when you call for reference, they're going to tell you. And he goes, you've been so accurate. We're going with you instead of us. Well, that was 4 years ago. And that's where I just came back from Australia for the 2nd time working with his group. And that opened so many doors to realize I could very accurately predict who's good. And tracking, I now have quite a few companies, and we track how long the people stay that I recommend. And so I've been working with that one company 4 years, but I was working with a test company 1 year prior to that. So out of those 2 companies, because I've been with them the longest, the 5-year person has only lost 2 of the people I've recommended, and the 4-year company, it's huge, has only lost 1. And so it's a win-win.
Right.
So that to me is where the joy and the pleasure comes from, because you put the right person in the right job for the first time, they stay. And it's expensive to train somebody.
Oh, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars in turnover in
Yes.
this world, and that's where you don't, everybody thinks it's, we'll just replace, but you're taking, every time you do that, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And this sounds like, to me, the smartest investment that companies are making is you as a resource.
Well, hire right the first time. But then what was really cool too is I was giving a talk, and again, I have no idea who my audience is. I just give my talk, right, my general talk. And one of the people in the audience was a lawyer. And she came up to me afterwards and she said, could I ask you to compare names of, here's the judge's name, here's my client's name, how should I present this case? Could you do that? And I said, oh, absolutely, because you can compare names and see where the issues are going to be. We can even compare like the 2 people going at each other in the courtroom that they had to hire lawyers and see where the real issues are and what the solution is, because the solutions are always in names. And so I started with her, and we've done so many cases and everything. And what I think is funny is that the HR director, backtracking for a minute, that I started with as my test case 5 years ago, she took my course, so she doesn't have to call me very often anymore. She says, I can do this for myself now, which is wonderful because you can learn it in 15 hours. It is so simple, so that's the coolest part. But anyway, so I started helping lawyers, and she recommended me to other lawyers, and that's how it is. My entire business has been built on word of mouth.
One of the things that I love about talking to you, Sharón, is your joy in what you do. And you're a woman, and as I've gotten to know you, when you talk about your teaching, there's such joy in you. When we talk about Neimology Science, there is such joy in everything you're doing and every person you're touching. Have you always, and I'm going to ask like complete disclosure here, have you always lived at this 100% joy perspective? Or has this come with age? Has this come with knowledge? Because I think, as much as I adore what you're teaching and I love to delve in there, I'm so inspired and impressed with you as a woman.
Well, thank you. And the answer is, I think it was internal. I grew up in a very challenging household where we experienced emotional and physical abuse. Okay. And so I don't have to go into details. So because of that, in 8th grade, I wanted answers. Why is life this hard? Why is it like this? And so I heard about a local church that was giving away free Bibles. And I thought, people talk about that and maybe there's answers there. And so I went down and said, what do we have to do to get a free Bible? And they said, you have to come every Sunday for a year and memorize these passages, and then you get your Bible. And I said, well, what if I want it faster than that? I mean, I wish I knew about getting free Bibles in hotels at that time, but I didn't. So anyway, 6 weeks later, I had memorized all the things, gone every Sunday for 6 weeks, and had my Bible. And then just to tell you how detail-oriented my brain worked, because even in 8th grade, I said, how many pages in the Bible? How many days left in the school year? How many pages do I have to read every night? And that's what I did. And so I started getting answers. And I know this sounds incredibly strange, but after I'd been reading for a couple of months every night, I got this voice over my left shoulder, and I went, oh, that's why you're supposed to read every night, because then you get the audio version along with the visual version. I'm a kid. I don't know any better. And then when I stopped reading the Bible every night, the voice went away. But the voice would tell me, that part, they left out some history, and this part, you need to know this or that, and this part, whatever. Well, when I became a meditator at 18, and periodically that voice comes back, wherever it comes from, it's always been helpful. So I feel like it's been tested and it's positive, because if not, you're kind of wary of anything new. And so when I was meditating and when I started this looking at names, the voice sometimes would come in and give an impression to me. And I call it a voice, but I guess it's more of an impression or knowledge or a download. I have no idea. Okay. And so I would get questions like, have you thought about this? Well, have you considered this? It was literally like I was being guided all the way through when I was figuring this out. And I lived in a very tough household, and I lived in a neighborhood that you had to be able to stand up for yourself and you had to be tough. Okay. And so my oldest sister did it really well. And so she'd say, oh, you're way too nice. You've got to do it this way. You got to do it that way. So I literally got trained. But my dad has said, and my mom said, oh my God, she's the mediator. I had 4 siblings. You're the mediator. But my dad had said to me later in life, you're like the pop-up kid. We've watched you get knocked down so many times. And you're like that doll that gets knocked down. And
I remember that clown growing up.
Yeah.
I remember exactly what you're talking about.
So my dad says, we've watched you go through so many knockdowns in life and so many things that have happened that it would just keep them down for life. And he says, and you're like the pop-up doll and you just keep going. So I think it's something internal, but I really think it got developed that year that I read the Bible every night.
And I could see so much why building your brand today, you shine, there is an excitement to you in as you chat and as you converse. What tips do you have for our listeners? What can we clue into? And that's a really broad question, so I'm going to narrow it a little bit, and maybe we could do it in two parts. What tips do you have for our audience first on Neimology Science? What should we learn? What else can we know? How can we apply it? Where's our interest? And then I'm going to follow it up, and I'm going to give you this heads up. What can we learn from you as a woman? Because you are an inspiration.
Oh, well,
so let's start with Neimology Science.
Okay, so in Neimology Science, if you just learn the first vowels and how to communicate, your life gets better because you understand the other people quickly. And because there's a lot of depth there, right now there's a free article on my website, knowthename.com, that you can go and learn in depth. And like I said, by the end of this month, our goal is to have like a 64-page book on it, how to communicate, absolutely free, because I just want the knowledge out there. So right away to take away is that if your vowel is an A, an O, or a Y, these people like to talk facts first and then play and have fun after the business is taken care of.
Okay, slow down. I want to make sure everybody's grabbing that. That's an A, an
O,
or
a Y.
Y. A, O, or Y. They
Talk
want facts first and then play.
And then play. But if your first vowel in your name is not one of those three, then you've got to connect first. Hi, how are you? Did you get enough sleep? How's the family doing? All of that good stuff. Connect first, then do facts. Because if
which would be reflective of Ivy starting with an I.
Exactly. And we connected first before we started. And if you just know that much, that these people, the A, the O, and the Y, like if I'm talking to another A, I immediately say, what is it we need to do? Okay, let's get started, whatever. And then afterwards we go, so how are you? But if I'm doing the other vowels, the I, the E, or the U, it's how are you? How's everything going? We get that all connected first. Then what do we need to do?
Love it.
Just that. And if you realize that's how people operate, then let's say I'm a first vowel of an E and I want to connect, and that A comes up to me and says, hey, today we've got a blah, 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 then I'm not going to get my feelings hurt that they didn't say, hey, they didn't even ask how I am. They don't even care. Okay. So just that piece alone can help everybody. But it's all the book and the article that's now on there and the book that will be there very shortly will literally go into depth on how you buy gifts for somebody. Like, for an example, you're an I, and you would have a list of what you want. And it's not the money that somebody spends on you. It's did they get you something that you wanted?
Touché.
So it's like it says how to buy gifts. It says what to talk about. I've watched very shy people not be shy anymore because they know how to start a conversation where the other person talks the whole time and all they have to do is listen and nod and say yes, because you know what to ask. I mean, there's so much, and I just want it out there because I want to help people connect with other people. So,
and I think, and I so support you because I'm a strong, strong believer of our greatest success is about our relationships and our connections.
Oh, and it absolutely is.
Exactly. And if we can help people build strong relationships, build great connections, and see the resource and the gift in that is ongoing success.
Well, and the other interesting thing that I have found from doing Neimology is that there are some people that just want to be told what to do so they get it right. And there's other people who, on the love of God, never want to be told what to do because, by golly, they know they want to make their own decisions all the way. And so if you don't tell anybody what to do, but you make suggestions when people ask you questions. I never give advice because I jokingly say that I do not add vice to anybody's life. Okay. So I
like that, by the way.
So I just make suggestions. They call me, I go, this is what the names say. This is what it implies. Here's things that you could do to solve it according to your name. And then I totally leave all the decisions to the other person. Occasionally the person I'm reading for will say, so tell me exactly what I need to do. And I think that's a person who wants to make sure that they're doing it right. And then I have to ask questions like, well, what do you want the end results to be? Let's work backwards. Okay. And show them how to make a decision for themselves, because I think we need to empower each other. You know, I don't want to take away their empowerment or their power of making their own decision and owning that choice. Instead, can we work backwards? You know, same like when two kids were in front of me because they fought or they did something wrong and the, you know, whatever, and the security guards would bring them in when I was a VP. I'd say, okay, let's work backwards. How did this start? Look at all the different places you had a chance to make a different decision and you wouldn't have ended up here. And what are you going to do differently next time? What are you going to keep? What are you going to change? Same thing with what I'm doing now.
So a teacher is a teacher is a teacher.
I guess so. I guess so. You know, but it's...
And I love that because you're so true to who you are. If you're taking that example of being, you know, the vice principal and having the two kids who came in from a disagreement that escalated into a conflict, a fight, and teaching them the choices. And the same thing happens in business, in life, in our relationships, in multiple places, and it's the same solution.
Right. But now that what's cool is really when you're comparing names, the solution sits right there. I mean, it's like you don't have to do a whole lot of thinking. You just have to know how to read the names. So it's like
Sharón,
shortcuts.
It's the Shortcut for Dummies book, so to speak, by a brilliant woman. Share with us, how do we learn more? You've mentioned a few resources, and listeners, don't panic. It's all going in the show notes, so don't panic about the spelling or the things. But Sharón, share with us all the resources that are going to be in the notes for our listeners.
Well, the website is Know the Name, and it's a KNOW. And I always jokingly say, if you're driving or you're busy and you're listening, and later on you go, oh, I want to remember the name. What was the name of that? I need to know the name. And you go, oh, that was it. knowthename.com. And everything is there. How to access this interview will be there once you give that to me. And the book, if you want to learn it that way. If you classes, we've got an online class twice a year. We have in-person classes twice a year if you want to learn it that way. If you want to learn it off discs at your own pace. I mean, we have all the ways possible for anybody to learn this. And literally in class, I think it's kind of ironic that it took me 15 years to figure it out, and I can teach it in 15 hours.
I love that.
That's
the math teacher's gift of numbers.
Well, and for everybody to know, there's absolutely no numbers involved. It's placement, it's letters. Everybody goes, oh, well, you're a math major, so it must involve math. And I said, no, it doesn't involve any math. It just patterns. Because a math person's brain is so trained in patterns.
I love it. So thank you so much for joining me here today. Thank you for waking up early from Hawaii, by the way. Listeners, we are gifted with a woman who got up for us.
Bless you.
Stay tuned to more wonderful interviews on her success story. Remember, you can subscribe and have it show up in your inbox and on your podcast apps. Look forward to more great women, more great people, and another great series coming up later this year. Sharón, thank you for joining me here today.
My absolute pleasure. You're a wonder.